Okay, all right. Let's try this one again. Thank you everyone for being here. Can you still see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yes, okay, awesome. Okay, so I'm Ramona Hattendorf. Pam is joining us online to help facilitate, and Eric Mathis is joining me in the person to help facilitate. And hopefully you see something on the screen called What's on the Ballot, and let's discuss. This is the companion guide. I didn't really know, this is the first time we've done something like this. And just so you know, the ARC is a 501c3, so we do not take positions on candidates. We don't endorse candidates, but we can absolutely talk about how you find out about information about candidates. And we have a lot of information about just like how voting works and some of the different tips and guides and things like that. So I've got this structured in sort of a system of how do you vote, to learning about the candidates, to filling out your ballot, and to dropping it off or mailing it. So I will get going. Cam, if you could do me a favor, the way it's set up, I see you, but I can't see the chat. So if there's any questions, just put up your hand and let me know, and I will pause and we can ask questions, answer questions. So this particular evening, we're going to focus on the primary here in Washington State, and that's August 4th. And we're also specifically going to talk about King County, since we're in King County, but some of this could probably be carried out statewide. So in King County, if you don't know, our primary election is when we just decide for candidates a top two. So say there's 5 people running, we're just going to pick the 2 who gets the most votes, and then they will move on to the general election. If there are only 2 people running, then they will automatically move on to the general election. Sometimes there are also local measures like levies on the ballot. And we have one of those in Seattle. I'm not sure if there's some smaller ones in some of the other cities. I didn't notice anything in my ballot booklet, but I'm in Seattle, so it wasn't on my ballot. But you might see something. Usually these are small, like it might be a school levy or a library levy. Sometimes fire districts need to have special levies for some funding. And I talk a little bit about what levies are a little bit later. So now. So, and just as a tip, generally things like levies, that's like a type of property tax to pay for extra things. Those don't really happen usually in the general election. Often those happen in special elections. So it might be like in February, or it might be during a primary. So that's just FYI if you're ever wondering about all the local levies. They usually are in the general election. So if you only vote in the general election, you may not realize just how many levies we have in King County. We have a lot. And then the general election is November 3rd. And that's when we're going to decide winners for the races. We're also going to vote on statewide initiatives. And I think there will be several this year. I did not prepare information about those initiatives yet. That will probably be a whole separate things just to pick apart those. But we do know there'll be one about a repeal for what is called the millionaire's tax. And that's a tax on income over $1 million. And then there's a couple other ones that deal with schools and students. And actually, they both deal with schools and students. Anyways, we expect to have 3 initiatives, and maybe there'll be more. We don't know until, I think, August what all will be on the ballot for initiatives. So to vote, you need to register. You need to learn about the issues or candidates, and you need to mark your choices on the ballot and then return the ballot. I have some links here. The voting accommodations for people with disabilities. This is put out by Secretary of State office, and that in turn gives you other kinds of links that you can go through. I will have links to different resources that also go into accessibility, but I wanted to make sure you get that one up front. And then to register to vote, you can be 18. You need to be a US citizen. To vote in Washington, you need to be a legal resident of the state for at least 30 days. You cannot currently be incarcerated for a felony. You can vote, you can get your voting rights after you finished your sentence, but if you are currently incarcerated for a felony, you can't vote. However, if you're in jail for a misdemeanor, you can vote. And then also, one thing, especially for the intellectual and developmental disability, you might be, depending if you're under guardianship, And depending on how that was written, you may be disqualified by the court to vote, but you may not. In that process, you need to be able to say, yes, assertively, I want to vote. Just having a guardian does not mean you lose the right to vote, but you may need to speak up and say, I want to vote. So that is something that for someone with an intellectual and developmental disability, if they're under guardianship, they might want to check to see if that is a situation for them. If they are under guardianship, and if you have lost your right to vote and you want to vote, there is a way to petition the court to get back that right. And I will also have some other resources about what the law says about that. But being under guardianship, the main thing to know is that you do not automatically lose the right to vote. You can keep your right, or you can petition to get your right back. And then registration, if you aren't registered, today actually is the deadline for online registration. If you wanted to do mail-in, it needed to have arrived at the voting center today. However, in Washington, at least in King County, you can vote up to election day. So you might want to, not wait to the last minute because it might be crowded, but theoretically you could walk in at 7 o'clock and you could register and then you could vote that day. So you can vote up through election day and still vote. And some deadlines, again, today was the 27th. And then for the November 3rd, if you say I'm just going to miss the primary, I can't do anything about it, but I still want to vote for the general election, you can register online by the 26th. And or you can also mail it in, and it needs to be there 8 days beforehand. And you can go in person at a vote center. And I also have information about vote centers a little later on. So first of all, did anyone have any questions about who can vote, how to register? Okay, all right, awesome. Then I just want to talk real briefly about the library levy. And especially if you're in King County, I've never voted in the other counties. And I'm in Seattle, but between Seattle and King County, we have a lot of levies. And there's a reason for this. So a levy is a type of property tax. And the state has like the main property tax, and that mostly goes to schools. But then some of that money can get dispersed to counties and to some other places, but most of it goes to schools. And it doesn't give the counties enough to cover what they want to cover. And so they can have a sales tax, but the state limits how much you can ask total and all the different property taxes. And the state also limits how much you can ask for in a sales tax. And so some local areas for years have relied on local levies. They're called local excess levies, and that's because they're in addition to the main property tax. And they're for a very specific thing, and they're for a very finite amount of time. So like, for instance, if you're in King County, there's something called Best Starts for Kids. That's a levy. People pass the levy. At the end of the levy cycle, it goes away. The county can ask to bring it back, and they call it renewal, or they could let it go away. And then these levies can only pay for exactly what the levy says they're going to be pay for. And they're only, again, for that finite time. So they have to be repurposed. And counties, often between the money they get back from the property assessed and the sales tax, have wanted to offer more services. And so we see a lot of these local levies. Our local school districts really rely on levies, but also some parks. The Seattle one is specific about some operating costs. It's about new library materials. And it is a renewal. So there was a previous one. It's expiring. They want to bring it back. And bringing it back, they're going to ask for more money. And so that's something that some people in Seattle have been talking about. To give you, they go into like exactly how much they charge per, square footage and things like that. But just for an average, for the median means there's just as many above and just as many below. But for a medium value property, this tax would cost someone $163. And if people are wondering, like some people are concerned about, there's a lot of property taxes. We really want really good libraries. We're concerned about property taxes. There is property tax relief for older folks And for people with disabilities, I believe it kicks in at 65, but I would have to look that up. For people with disabilities, I believe it can be at any age, but it's limited to income up to $84,000. So that's not going to apply to everyone. But so we do have the local property tax in Seattle. I think a lot of people like the idea of the library, but there's a little bit of concern about how much in property taxes can we ask voters for. And I'm wondering if there's any questions or anyone wants to talk about the library levy. Okay, all right.
Yeah, this is Laura.
Yeah,
I'm sorry I'm
I
a
thought.
little late. I just wondered, is there any information about reading for the blind in the library tax? Do you know if they include anything like that?
You mean like the library for the blind?
Yes, and
Or
or if the
um,
public library has any. I
I
actually
don't
don't know
I
if they have.
I don't know. When I was reading about it, I didn't read anything that specifically called out materials for the blind. I do
Okay.
know there's a library specifically for resources. And I know I can remember the legislative session, like they lost money, but then it got restored. I think they got funding that they needed because there was either they did close down or they were afraid they were going to close down.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so I can't remember. I think that right now they're okay. So, but I think they might
Okay.
have actually had to close down and then they got reopened.
Okay, I know Marcy Carpenter. I'll ask her.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I think that's separate from the Seattle library system. So this
Okay.
particular levy is specific to the Seattle library system, but that is a really good question. I don't know what they have in their what do you call it? Their stock, what do you call it? For like all the materials. I don't know what they have, but that is a
Uh-huh.
really good point. What sort of accessibility, audio and visual aids and things like that? What are their
Right.
materials? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Laura.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So again, on taxes, we don't have an income tax. And again, in the general election, we'll be talking about the millionaire's tax, which is a type of income tax, but only for your second million. Your first million's free. Um, so we don't have an income tax, and so that means as a state, we're really relying on the property tax. We really lean into sales tax, and we lean into a lot of these very specific levies, and we lean into a lot of user fees, like, car tabs is a type of user fee. Paying to get into a park is a type of user fee. And that's really how we sort of provide public services. Most counties don't actually provide human services like King County does. So we've got a lot of property taxes, and some people like that and they're totally fine with it. Other people get a little bit stressed out about it. But traditionally, King County's been pretty in favor of the local levies. Um, but it does come to tax. The counties could have an option of a business tax. But the business tax, because we don't have any income tax, they don't tax profit. What they do is they tax like the cost of all their goods and their gross proceeds. So what that means is it's not how much, like say they bring in a lot of money, but say a lot of that has to go back out because of whatever their business is, and they're actually only making, it's going to be more than $5, but say they're only making $5. The way the business and occupation tax works is they don't get taxed on that $5 profit. They get taxed on that cost of all the materials that they have to have for the business. So there tends to be a lot of resistance around business and occupation taxes. Seattle, I believe, is the only city in the state that did a payroll tax. They called it Jumpstart. And that's where they're doing it basically a kind of like a head count tax that companies over a certain size. And the company has to be over a certain size, and it's for people who make a certain amount of money. So it was kind of a way of getting towards taxing more wealth. But as far as I know, Seattle is the only one who has that kind of tax. Pretty much everyone else, they're either looking at a sales tax or they're looking at another local levy. Are any questions about taxes? Okay, all right. So the candidates, that's pretty much the rest of what we're going to be voting on in the primary. And there will be federal, there'll be state, and there'll be county. I actually forgot that we were doing county this year. About 4 years ago, we voted in King County and we said, we're going to do the county council at the same time we do state and federal. We used to do it in odd years were local races, so city council, county council, school boards, and even years were state and federal races. And they switched it up and they decided to put counties. And this is, I believe, the first year that we're voting on the county. But we're not voting on all of them. We're just voting on like half of them. So we've got federal, state, and local. And all of these positions are, except for an assessor that we're voting on, they're not executive offices. An executive office is like a governor, a mayor, the president of the United States. And what that means is they run the agencies, they run things. The legislative bodies, they make the laws. And something that is really important is that they pass the budgets. And I in this handout, I have just some screen grabs of like a federal budget and a state budget and the county budget, just because it's really important when you're evaluating candidates, like just to know what they do. And if there's certain things that you care about, just to kind of have an idea of like where that falls in the budgeting process. But anyway, so yeah, so these people are going to make the laws, adjust the laws, either at the county, state, or federal level, and they're going to pass budgets. And they only do it in their own jurisdiction. So federal is only federal, state is only state, and county is only county. Are there any questions about legislative versus executive? Oh, okay. All right, so Congress is huge. You got a US Senate and you got a US House. Again, they only do federal laws and federal budgets, and they've got 100 senators. So every state gets two, and they have 6-year terms. And none of our senators are up for re-election this cycle. There are 435 representatives. 10 of those are for Washington, and they have 2-year terms. So every 2 years, they have to run for re-election. And 4 of those touch in King County. Some of them also include parts of other county. But in King County, for the federal, we've got the 1st congressional district, the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th. And I believe those are all up for vote. And then just FYI, it doesn't necessarily affect us here in Washington, but there's 6 non-voting delegates in Congress. And those are for the District of Columbia, which is legally called a federal district. They're for Puerto Rico, which is legally called a Commonwealth. And then there's 4 for the US territories of American Samoa, Guam, Northern Mariana, and US Virgin Islands. So that's just FYI. They get to have somebody there, but they're not voting. They don't get to vote in their interests. And that's another thing about legislative stuff, is that it's really about representing the voters. So that's something else, like, like what kind of decisions, what are their values, what is it they want to work on, what expertise, but also are they going to listen to the voters? I said before a little bit about the budget. So one of the biggest things our representatives do is they vote on the budget, because nothing happens, like even the policy, if you don't have money to implement the policy, it's not going to happen. And just for FYI, in case you're wondering about the federal budget, this is a snapshot of how it's broken up. This one, it's probably going to be a few years old. I see one thing, they're referencing a 22 student loans, but I don't think it's too far out of whack. But so health insurance, that's Medicaid and Medicare. So Medicaid and Medicare combined are almost a quarter of the budget. And then Social Security is 21%. So that's what, 45%? Yeah. And then defense is 13% of the budget. And then interests. United States takes out a lot of loans, and then we have to pay interest on the debt. And so 13% of the budget goes to debt relief or the interest payments. And then you've also got then veterans, for 8%, and you've got economic security programs. So I think that's going to be things like food assistance, and education is 5%. And then you've got all natural resources, science and research, law enforcement. You've got all of those that make up much smaller pieces. So in case you're wondering, defense is 13%, Social Security 21%, and then Medicaid and Medicare are 24%. So when they're having conversations about not bringing in as much revenue and they need to cut programs, there's not a whole lot they can take out of something like transportation and save a lot of money. If they're talking about having less money come in, but they still have to do their interest debt, and they still want to spend on defense, and then they have to do the Social Security, because that's Social Security, and then a quarter, or I would say half of health insurance is Medicare. So Medicare is something somebody pays into. Social Security is something somebody pays into. But the only thing on here that has some flexibility for cuts is Medicaid, unless you get into the yellow ones. So just something to keep in mind. And that's the federal level. Any questions about federal? Okay, all right. And then on state legislators, it's smaller. It's not as big as Congress, but there's still a lot of them. We've got a Senate and we've got a House. And again, they only consider state laws and state budgets. And they can confirm appointments made by the governor. Oh, I forgot to mention, on the federal, they can impeach people. At the state level, they can confirm appointments made by the governor. And then on this one, there are 49 senators. So we're divided, the state is divided into 49 legislative districts, and there's one per district. And they have 4-year terms, so they don't have to run as often. And we have 98 representatives. So that's 2 in each legislative district. So you each, assuming that you're a voter in Washington State, you each have 3 representatives, or you have 2 that are called representatives, and you have 1 that's called a senator. So you have 3 statewide legislative people representing you. And then the representatives have to run every 2 years. So they're running a lot. And the senators only have to run every 4 years. So about half of the legislative districts that touch on King County are up for re-election, but all of the people in the House of Representatives are running. And then again, like federal, passing budget, it is a huge part of what state legislators do. And this biennium in particular, they're going to have to make, a biennium is the 2-year, it's a 2-year cycle. We vote legislators in to serve 2 years, and they call that a 2-year, they call that biennium, they call that 2 years of biennium. And so this upcoming biennium will be year 1 and year 2. They're going to have to figure out what to do about some big things. Like the federal government has made some cuts, and they've also done some things where it's not necessarily a cut, but they shifted a lot of administrative costs onto the state. And the cuts were like, they trimmed back on what they're going to do for SNAP, which is food, like food stamps. And they've also trimmed back how states can raise money for Medicaid. Anyways, states are expected to absorb a lot of costs, things that the federal government used to pay for, but now maybe won't, or new costs that the federal government is requiring them to do. There's a lot of new administrative costs. So in the state, they're going to have to figure out, okay, what do we do about these costs? Do we try to absorb these costs? And so does that mean we raise taxes? Do we make cuts? What do we cut? So there's going to be a lot of discussion, hopefully, not just action, but there's going to be a lot of like, what do we do about money? And they did pass this millionaire's tax, but even if the voters uphold it, and even if the courts uphold it, we're not going to see any revenue for a couple of years. So for the next 2 years, we're kind of anticipating some tough budget years, which means probably not new investments. And we're really going to be looking at what do they want to cut. Like here at the ARC of King County, we're already concerned about, it's a pretty small program called Parent to Parent. It's in every county. The whole program statewide is only $900,000. And they're looking at cutting it. Like even before they go through the whole legislative process, there's a chance that the governor will just not renew the contract. So we're kind of looking at that as a foreshadowing. So something else to consider when your state representatives is, well, what is it that they want to do about money? Specifically, like, what do you want to do about Medicaid? If they want to, if they're saying we need to invest in this area, like, that's awesome. But what are the implications for other areas? And then for Medicaid, they're really looking at some different options. If they decide they have to cut it, they can do that by changing eligibility, like so fewer people qualify. And that was a proposal last year. It was the governor's office floated it. And for personal long-term care, about 5,000 people would have lost long-term care in a proposal they floated. And half of those would have been people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. So that's one option, is they change eligibility so fewer people can get services. That was a very alarming proposal. Another thing they can do to keep in mind when you're thinking about legislators and maybe asking or talking to them, they can cut by cutting provider pay. So they're going to say, we're going to keep the same enrollment, but we're just going to, instead of paying providers, we're just going to cut how much they make, like by 10% or something like that. And on paper, that may look like, well, we're not cutting services and we're not cutting people. But when you start to cut provider pay, what happens is you lose providers and people can't access care because they can't find a provider. But that's another option. So they can reduce eligibility or they can cut provider pay. And then the third one is they can cut out optional services. And again, this came up last session. Like, optional services are not very much in Medicaid that's considered optional, but long-term care for people with developmental disabilities, that's optional. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech and language therapy for adults, that's optional. And we saw a proposal to cut OT, PT, and speech language therapy. In the end, they didn't go that way, but there was an option for that. They also looked at cutting those same services they called it early supports for infants and toddlers. And so those are from like 0 up to age 3. They looked at cutting those services for those. They didn't go into dental, but dental is another optional one. They also looked and did cut back on developmental disability services. They didn't cut as much as they were originally looking at. They scaled it back, and we're very thankful for that, but they cut them. And so this is what we're looking at. So especially if people are saying they want to invest in one area, like, well, okay, well, what does that mean for this other area? And just in case anybody is curious, the state actually has 3 budgets. They have an operating budget, transportation budget, and a capital budget. And the operating budget is by far the biggest one. And it has, like, in this little pie part, there's something that nobody knows what's called, because why would you know what NGF-0 means? But that's basically your state revenue. It's like, your property taxes, it's all your different state revenue. That's going into the state money. And so you have federal money, which a lot of it could be things like the Medicaid match or Medicare. There's different federal money that comes in. There's federal money for some schools and other programs. So you have federal money, you've got all your state money, and then you've got other. Other got big last year because a foundation wanted to spend money very nicely on some preschool programs. So you also just literally can have money that comes in from private donations. And then transportation is a much smaller budget. That is, the operating pays for things like state patrol, any workers for the state ferry system, and then a lot of transportation is like building, it's roads and things like that. And then capital is like building buildings. And so they make decisions about that. And in case you were curious, on the state budget, this graphic, this pie chart, is how they spend the state money. So this isn't federal mixed in yet. This is just the pure state dollars. And of the state dollars, 42% goes to public schools. We've got low income health at 12%. And so that would be Medicaid, Apple Care. You have 16% to Department of Social and Health Services. That's the brighter pink. That's where long-term care. Other things lay there too. Other types of sort of safety net funding lays in health and services also. but your long-term care is going to be in the bright pink. And then your Apple Health, like your doctor visit type Medicaid, is going to be in the lighter pink. And then they also, they take out loans, so they have debt service. Children, youth, and families, that's early learning, it's juvenile detention, it's our child welfare department, higher education, or colleges and universities, corrections or jails, and all other. That's just to give you an idea. These are the types of decisions that legislators make on what to make that pie. And then I gave you links, this July 2026 presentation. This was something that was, the state had a hearing a couple weeks ago on transparency around the budget. And that's where I pulled these slides from. And this link will take you to that presentation, and there's more slides. And then there's also something called a citizen's guide to the operating budget. And the link is here. And this, it just explains, it goes into more detail about how the budget is done. But I just wanted to give you, I need to reduce this a little bit so you can see what I'm talking about here. I hope you can still see this on your end. On the state budget, so you have the state budget where it's only the state dollars. And then you have the state budget after the federal dollars pour in. And I want to show you this because I want to show you the impact that the federal dollars have. And so when we're talking about getting a lot less federal money, it's going to put a lot of pressure on how state stuff is funded. And so this bar chart here is showing all the money, federal and state. And when you have federal and state, human services becomes much bigger than public schools. There's a lot more there. Human services is 44. Again, this is a few years back, but it's similar proportions still. So your public schools are 25% in this bar chart, and your human services make up 44%. And the state-only revenue, public schools make up. Public schools then surge to 43%, and human services fall to 30%. But when you look at the federal, you see just how much human services. So if the federal is really cutting back on that human services budget, then legislators, do we have to make the decision of, do we not have those human resources? Do we not have those services? Do we cut back on those services? Do we try to find additional revenue for those services? So that's just some context. Any questions about the types of decisions? No? Okay. And so then you go into King County, and much smaller. How many were in the Congress? There were hundreds in the Congress, 500 more. King County got 9. So it's entirely different thing. On the big ones, they got their own little systems. You got legislators that have to work to each other. Like one person can't really do anything alone. They have to work with each other, and they have caucuses and groups that meet and align and all kinds of committees. King County is very small. There's only 9 members on the council. And I have a link here that explains, it's a nice little brochure. It's only 2 or 3 pages. It does a nice job of explaining what the council does. So I have a link there. And they only consider, again, county policies and the county budget. And King County, we have a legal system. So we pay for the legal system, like the public defenders, the legal defenders. The courts are run independently. The county doesn't run the courts, but the county collects money for some of the court stuff. We have a county sheriff, but that's only for the unincorporated areas. So if you live in a city, say, Bellevue or Burien or SeaTac, you probably have your own police department. But some places don't have their own city, and they have their unincorporated, so they have the county sheriff. Again, King County does a lot of health and human services. They do not have a levy in the primary, but they do a lot of levies. Like they have a Best Starts for Kids levy, they have the Veterans levy, they have a levy specifically around behavioral health support. They have a lot of levies. So we've got health and human services, Metro Transit, the buses, that's a big part of their budget, waste management. So I live in a part of Seattle where there's a huge Magnolia. They have a huge waste management plant over there. So they actually spend a lot of money on treating wastewater. And then they have county parks. And then they also have to pay for elections, records, and licensing. And when they pass laws, it becomes part of King County Code. And in case you're curious, there's a link to the King County Code. I've never actually read the King County Code. I spend most of my time at the state level, but there's all kinds of exciting ordinances in King County, should you care to look them up. There's also, again, this is a link to the brochure. This is how they do their budget. So I'm going to go to this square at the bottom. It says restricted and flexible. And restricted is more, and it's gold, and flexible is small, and it's blue. And one of these links, they had like a little quick guide. They had a little video. Like it's, I don't know, maybe 3 minutes. It's actually pretty informative. It's very short. It's very, very, very watchable. So I encourage you to look at it. But they explain the budget. And most of the budget is restricted because it's tied to these levies. So they can only, or something specific, like they can only spend Metro money on Metro. They can only spend the Best Starts program money on the Best Starts programs, things like that. And then the blue is what's flexible. That's their general fund. And you think general fund would be big and restricted might be small, but that's not the way it is at King County. It's flipped. And so this little small blue size that says flexible, if you go, and I'm sorry, it's convoluted. I just screen grabbed these from different things I was looking at. If you look at the one that says general fund expenditures and you see the maroon big pie, this little blue thing that says flexible, and then this other circle to the upper left, that is what the flexible is. So of those flexible funds, and that's really where that's where the council members at King County can change around those funds. They can't really do anything to restricted funds, but they can shift around the flexible funds. And so most of that is justice and safety. So local jails, the county elections, the assessor is the person who runs like how to assess property for taxes. There is some health and human services in the general fund, and there are some parks. They supplement those through these different restricted funds, but they have a little bit there. And then delivery of county services. And I don't know the specifics of that. I just grabbed this out of the brochure, but 14% goes to delivery. So I'm assuming probably staffing, I'm going to guess. And there's 4% for other. And then some people wonder, like, what's the deal? I just kicked it off by talking about levies. And so again, like you have that state property tax levy. The county collects all the property taxes in King County, but they don't keep all that money. They send 53 cents off to the state, and that goes to pay for schools. 17 cents gets redistributed to the different towns and cities that are in King County. And then 8 cents goes to other districts. I'm going to guess maybe fire districts or things like that. And then 2 cents go to Sound Transit. That's like our light rail. So 20 cents stays in King County. And that 20 cents is what's that blue flexible, and that pays for justice and safety and all of those things. So that's just FYI, in case you ever wondered how the county budget works. And then I also have, I kind of repeat here, the 50 cents goes to the state for schools and the rest gets dispersed. And I have a link to the county budget process. And then this with all the money. So
Ramona?
this, yeah.
Sorry, there's a hand up, Andre.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, go. Andre?
Andre's on mute.
Hi, can you hear me, Ramona?
I can.
Hi, thank you so much. Question: at looking at that pie chart that's there,
Yeah.
that guy right there. Now that's within the fiscal year. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, I think this is just a fiscal year, 1 year for the county. The state is a biennium, so the state budget looks at 2 years and then it's implemented.
Okay.
But I think the county is just every year.
Okay. And question now, is that from, because it kind of works, so I know a lot of places are different. Is it from January to December, or is it from like at mid-year, like some places are like from August to August. I'm not sure. It's been so long since I did it.
Yeah, the state is July 1 through June 30th.
Okay. Okay.
And I think the county is, I'm not sure anymore at the county, because they were one and they switched it. Either they were calendar year and they switched it to the fiscal. If it's not calendar year, then it is fiscal year. And the fiscal year starts July 1. I want to say the county was calendar year and they switched it a few years ago, but I'm not positive about that.
You know what? Thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, those of us who get contracts with state and county, it's like, because that all depends on when we get our money and how long contracts are due. So this many slices of the pie. This is like the total King County budget. So there's not like any one thing that really stands out way above the rest, but most of it's going to community and human services. So that's the general fund, which was the smaller piece of the pie, and then any specific levy money that goes to that. And then Metro Transit is also pretty big. So human services, Metro Transit, and then again, the wastewater. We spend a lot of money in our wastewater treatment plants. So this is just an idea of all the different things. And so say like you really care about parks and you're passionate about parks and you're talking to your legislators about parks. You just need to know that it's a very small slice of the pie. And so if you want it to be a bigger piece of the pie, does that mean we spend less on wastewater? So just so you know, because these are all things that, the candidates need to be thinking about and the people who actually hold office needs to think about. So I just wanted to give that some perspective. So you kind of know whether they know this or not, these are the kind of decisions that they're going to have to make on your behalf. So I wanted to share some budget, but now I think I'm done talking about budget. Unless anyone has any other questions about budget. All right. Okay. And so now we're doing a lot of judges. We're doing Washington Supreme Court. So these are the people that they hear appeals and they review decisions. And they basically decide is something constitutional or not. And by constitutional, it's the state constitution. It's not the US Constitution. The US Supreme Court decides the federal constitution. Our court only see what aligns with the state constitution. And they're going to serve for 6 years. And there's going to be 5 of the 9 seats are up for vote. So it's because there are a lot of retirements, there are some term endings. So it's kind of a big deal on who's going to be on the Supreme Court. So that's what they do. And then we also have district court judges, and they decide criminal misdemeanor cases like small claims, traffic cases, protection orders, and they serve for 4 years. And then there were also voting in King County on the assessor. And this is the person who sets property values and then make sure to collect the county taxes. And then there might be some cities, so depending on where you live, you might see under the local race, sometimes people have to leave office. Either they're elected to something else, whatever, and then they have to have a special election. And in Seattle, there's one council member who left, and so they're having a special election just for that one city council seat. But generally, we're not looking at school boards this cycle, and we're not looking at city or town councils. We're mainly just looking at county, all those judges, and federal, and a bunch of legislators. We're looking at a lot of state legislators that we're voting on. All right. So then, like, how do you learn? Like, I know one person in the registration, like, how do I find out about these people? So there's a couple different tools here. King County has the local voters pamphlet, which if you're registered, you get mailed. You can also, this long link here, it says cdn.kingcounty. That's a PDF version of that. So if you wanted to, you could click and you can open that up. But the links in that aren't live. So just so you know, it has a lot of good information. It has all the candidate positions. Washington State also has a voter's guide. And the nice thing about Washington State is that when you click on it, in fact, I'm going to stop sharing this here in just a minute, and I want to open up this link, and I want to take you to the Washington State Guide, because you can click and you can get more information about the candidates. You'll see it comes up with whatever the statement is that's in the guide is there, but also you can click to their webpage. You can click to like who's contributing to them. So let's see, I think I need to go. Sorry, I have this touchscreen technology. I have to go literally, yeah, can you go do that? Can you go hit stop share? All right, and then I'm going to let me see where. All right, so I'm going to click on this. And hopefully I can get the share back and it will be good. All right, and then I'm going to go back. Sorry, I'm talking out loud. I'm just trying to tell myself I had a lot of challenges getting this technology working. Where's my share screen? I'm not seeing it. Yeah, do you see it? Where'd it go? Let's go.
I'll go to more. I think.
Show, breakout, Q&A. All right, where did my share screen go?
Oh.
Huh. This is interesting. Okay, I'm going to close the chat, see if it shows up. Okay, more. Oh, here we go, share. Okay.
Right.
All right. Okay, so now do you see something called a voter's guide primary 2026?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, I'm gonna go. So if you go to legislative candidates, we're gonna pick on Shelley. I know Shelley, she's a lovely lady. Okay, so you go to, all the districts are there. So if you go, this is the same information that's in the printed guide. Like you're gonna have the statement, you'll have their education, you'll have their community services, all that great stuff. But over here, you also have some links, like you can email them directly. So those of you who want to have candidate forms, you would click on this to email them to the candidate form. Say you want to know, well, what are their positions? Like, what do they have to say about Medicaid? What do they have to say about schools? I care about the environment. What do they say about the environment? If you click on that, it'll take you to their candidate website. Did it go through okay, Pam? Do you see like Shelley's website now?
Yes.
Sorry, I should say Representative Kloba. Shelley's someone's I've known for decades. So I'm sorry, it's Representative Kloba. I'm being disrespectful. Representative Kloba's website page. So this is where a lot of times you can see like the issues, like what does this particular person do? You can see who's endorsing this person. You can see testimonials. So you can get information that way. Another thing I like about this, if you go into campaign contributions, you can see who's donating. You can see how much was added up. If you go and you click on the contributions tab, you can see like how many are in kind. You can see, you can find out who's donating to them. You can see, are these Washington people? Are these out of state people? I was looking at some of them and yeah, it's interesting. Some have like maybe they've brought in 10,000. Some people have brought in like $200,000. It's really interesting that if you're kind of curious about who the candidate is, who's supporting them, what are their positions, this is a nice launch startup point because you can at least check on their website. Like this is what they're sharing that they really care about and they value. And then you can get a little bit more if you're kind of curious about, well, who else is supporting them and how. You can go to the campaign contribution sheet. So it just gives you a little bit more information. It's because it's interactive. So I just wanted to show that. And now I'm going to go back to hopefully finding the file I had before. I need to go find my file who I had before. Where are you, file? Okay, let's go back. Okay, now it's not showing. Well, let's see if I can get this, if it'll click through for me. All right.
We see your
Do
downloads
you
folder.
see, it says Washington Primary Voters Guide online written? You, I'm sorry, you don't see the guide?
No, I see your downloads folder.
Darn, didn't work. All right. Well, let me stop. Screen sharing here, stop. Windows closed. Okay, let's try this one again. All right, now do you see? I think it's okay. Okay, now do you
Yeah.
see? Okay, all right. So that's what I show. I showed you the first one, the first link, that's just the PDF guide of what the county shares you. A lot of repeat information in the state one, but you have other links that you can click on so you can learn a little bit more about the candidates. And then there's also hopefully for the general, we'll have way more. But there are some video and some audio options for folks. TVW, which stands for TV Washington, and they do all the legislative hearings. They just basically, it's kind of like public access, but for the whole state. And they have a video voters guide right now. It only has the candidates for Supreme Court, but they have them all. It's kind of cool. I listened to all of them. So you have a sense of like who they are, how they hold themselves, how they present themselves. And they have a video, they have American Sign Language, and they have a transcript. So it's kind of nice. It's pretty accessible. I'm hoping that they'll have legislative candidates like after we get past the primary, but right now they have the Supreme Court candidates. And then if you're in Seattle and you're a Seattle area voter, they have the Seattle channel, which is a public access channel. They have similar videos. They do not have American Sign Language interpretation though, but they do have video and they have that with captioning. And they have videos for the candidates for county assessor, for the county council race, and for the municipal court. So that's like the misdemeanor courts. And then also the ARC of Washington State and a coalition called the Community Advocacy Coalition for Developmental Disabilities. We're part of both of these. We put out a candidate questionnaire. And so there's a questionnaire and only the people who responded have them on there. So there's not all. I wished everyone responded to it, but there are some on there. And on those ones, we ask specifically around disability. So you can see what candidates have to say about their thoughts about disability. There's also a nonpartisan election guide. I know there's other ones too. There's guides that say this is who we recommend you vote for. And then there's guides that don't give any recommendations, but they just sort of say this is what's going on. The Seattle Times has both. I'm linking you to KUOW because it's free. It's NPR, National Public Radio. And so there's no charge. It's accessible to anyone. It's not behind any sort of like, you need a subscription to get it. So, but this goes in, it tells you a little bit about all the different races you're going to do and what you might want to watch for. So we have, that's another guide. And so this section of the presentation was just around like, how do you learn about the candidate? And I wanted to pause here to see if anyone had any questions or anyone wanted to talk about any of those resources, or if you all have tips to share about how you learn about candidates.
Ramona, Jenny shared in the chat that she recommends Full Court Press Scorecard as a useful tool as well.
Full Court Press. I'll have to look at that one. I'm not familiar with that one. Yeah, any other tools? No. And then also, like, if you go to the candidate websites, a lot of times they will say like who has endorsed them. So that's kind of handy too. Oh, so anyway, so that's how you learn about the candidates. And then you make the choices. So hopefully you have your ballots. You need a pen and it can be any color. For those of us who had to do like fill in the blanks in school and it had to be only a black pen or only a blue pen, you don't have to worry about that. Either color will work. And then you need to sign and date the ballot. But you should also know there are some accessible options because, you know, filling out the ballot with pen and paper doesn't necessarily work for everyone. So if there's something called a vote center, And there's one in Renton that is like year round. And then there's other ones that are only with us some of the time. And so you want to collect to find out what the hours are. But if you go to the vote center, first of all, they can help you. Like if you have questions, they can talk it through you. If you need support to register, they can register you. And again, they can register and then you can vote there. They also have something called accessible voting units. And then this one, your ballot appears on a monitor and you're going to select the choices. It can be like touching the screen or using the tool. Often there are headphones, so it's read to you if that's what you need on the different instructions. So some people who the traditional paper and pen ballot doesn't work, there are accessible voting units. And you can also, I think I have down here, I have a link. You can, at the Renton site, book. I'll find it, I'll flag it when I find it, but there's a time where you can actually book them an appointment. So say you want some support, you have questions, you can only do it on this one day during your lunch hour, you can go ahead and see if you can book an appointment. So accessible voting option is an option for you. There's also something called online ballot marking, and it's designed specifically for voters who are blind, who have low vision. And I've not done it yet. I went to click through it, but it wanted me to actually vote on it. So I didn't pursue it all the way through. But that's also an option that people can use. If you need language support, you can get, this is something I learned this time. I actually learned it from the voters pamphlet. They've redesigned that pamphlet in recent years. It's pretty accessible. It's in plain language. You can get your ballot and your voter information mailed to you in a language other than English. And there's a link here where you can change your language preference. Say you are a Spanish speaking household, you can have your materials sent to you in Spanish. You can always go to their website. King County has a great website where if you click on their globe, there are many, many, many languages. And so you can choose your language and it automatically, translates it that way. But if you want materials mailed to you, you can get them in 7 different languages. And so I wanted to make sure I flagged that for people. Other options, there's some accessible voting events. And if you click on this, there's different times and different dates. Close to that one's closest, I want to say maybe the weekend before is at the Seattle Library, but they also had ones and other places, Somali community. There were some specific to the Somali community. So that's something else to check out too. And again, it's like voting staff will be there. They can explain the process. They're going to have voting accessible units. So if you think you might need that, that's another way to get support if you don't want to go to Renton or one of the other sites. There's also other resources, like this is what I started with at the top for resources with disabilities. The Secretary of State office lists other ones as well. And if you didn't get your ballot or you lost it, you can get a replacement ballot. You can go to the website, you can either print one from there, or you can get a mailed one, or you can go to Vote Center. And so that's options on, making your choice. Like once you've done your homework, you can fill out the ballot. And if the paper and pencil doesn't work for you or the paper and pen, there's other options. And then finally, you want to return the ballot. So you got choices. If you're at the voting center, you're going to do it in person. Otherwise, you can mail it or you can use a drop box. You don't need a stamp to mail it. Postage is free, but the U.S. Postal Service recommends that you mail it a week ahead of time. So that would be tomorrow. And that's just to make sure it gets there. Our law, and at least for now, it was upheld for the courts. This is one of those, feels like there's a lot of things that are like always up in the air with changes at the federal level. But right now, they're not changing anything about the state law about how we collect our mail-in ballots. The law says it just needs to be postmarked by Election Day. But you probably don't want to just drop it into a mailbox on Election Day. You probably want to make sure, you might want to mail it still the day ahead of time. You want to make sure that it's stamped, by Election Day. And sometimes if you just drop it into the post box and they don't actually collect it for till the next day, it may be late and not counted. So you technically, as long as it's postmarked by Election Day, it's okay. The post office folks are saying, we really think you should mail it a week before just to be safe. No stamp needed. But then there's also drop boxes. And I don't know if they had these last year, but they have it this year on your ballot. If you opens up, they tell you where your local drop boxes are. And so you can just fill that out. There's some links here where you can look up where all the different drop boxes are too. That's KCE wiki/Dropbox, and they're all over. There's many, but it's nice that they just tell you on your ballot right now. And then here's where the link didn't highlight, but the 10-minute appointment for the Rent and Vote Center, if you wanted to book an appointment, the link for that is there. And so that's the process. You register, you learn, you make choices, you return the ballot. And so can you do the stop share again?
Ramona, we had a question. I'm not sure if you covered this. Do drop boxes pick up daily?
That's a really great question. And I didn't read it. I was reading through everything again this weekend. And like any time of year, they don't. But when they get closer to the election, they do pick them up at daily. But like maybe 2 weeks or because the voting period has already started. Like they mailed out the ballots. I think, yeah, I would have to look that up for sure. But I do know as you get closer, they're going to pick them up daily. And as you get even closer, like to the day before, the day of, they may even do a couple pickups. But I do remember reading something last election that it's not necessarily, like early on, it's not necessarily every day. So something else to consider too, especially if you like just want to be extra careful. And also, and they tell you on your ballot, so like after you turn on your ballot, you can track it. So you can make sure that they got it. You can see if there's any questions sometimes. So here's how in King County, so we're all voting by mail. And then you have to sign the ballot with your signature. And sometimes they say, this doesn't really look like the signature that you have on file. And so they flag it. And then that's one where on your ballot, if you ever want, like, why do they want my phone number? Why do they want my email address? That's so they can contact you. So if you're like, we don't know if this is really you, that's why they have that contact information. But you can also go online and you can track your ballot. You just need to put in, if you're registered, you just need to put in your name and your birth date. I think it was just my name and my birth date. Oh, I think I had to do my address too. I think I had to put my name, my address, and my birth date. And then like in mine, it came up and it said, your ballot has been mailed to you. You have not yet returned it. And so say like I didn't get my ballot, then you would know, hey, I didn't get my ballot. And you might want to go and see if there's another ballot. So you can track that. And then say you turned it in, you're like, I haven't counted it. What's wrong with it? That's where you can also make sure if there's any problem with the signature. I've personally never had a problem with the signature, but I know my daughter did. She ran into that because she signed up when she was very young. She's a little bit older now. Her signature has changed. And so they did. They reached out to her and they said, is this really you? And she had to verify that, yeah, that's really me. I can't remember exactly what she had to do. I think she had to like sign something and send it back. I can't remember the exact process, but there is a process to verify your ballot. There any? So I've been chatting, I've been talking. Are there things that are on your mind that you are wondering about or you're hoping for this election cycle? Yeah, Laura.
Yeah, hi. Very good overview, by the way. Thank you. Are there any forums coming up for candidates?
I don't know of any specific candidate forums. I know, Pam, I don't know if we zeroed in on the exact date. I know we want to host one for the ARC of King County where like on topical, like broadly disability issues. And we want to invite all the different candidates in.
Good.
Yeah. So, and we're still sort of, because before we were thinking, do we want like 3 topics and, but we want to make sure people are coming and the candidates are going to be able to come. So probably do maybe one focused on state races and maybe one on federal, since they're kind of
Okay.
different issues. But I know we're working on one.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I can
Forward to-
I'm narrowing down on the dates, but probably August 31st for state, and federal is looking like September 15th. But I'm going to put in the chat a link to sign up for our newsletters if you're not signed up, or I think you are, but if others aren't, that would be a great way to stay in contact with us about upcoming events like that.
Yeah. And we'll also keep an eye out for other candidate forums as well. I think those ones really start kicking off after the primary. You're going to start seeing those in September and October. And then the ballot, usually there's like a 2-week voting window. So the ballots are going to go out maybe around October 20 something. So yeah, it's a pretty big voting window. And again, I'm waiting, but I do want to host something. I don't know whether we'll do it live or whether we'll just do materials, but I do want to do plain language guides to these initiatives. Because I think it's going to be really important to try to break that down for folks about what all is going on there. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Pam. And Pam, so Pam put in a link. This is called our voting guide. And it's kind of like how to vote. And it's in a style called easy to read. And it's kind of like if you've heard of plain language, it's very simple, but easy guide. It's formatted in a certain way where it's one sentence, one thought, and then there's also an image that goes with that one sentence, one thought. And so we break down a lot of what I just shared. Well, not so much going into the budgets, but we break down the information about the voting process into easy to read. And then we also use social stories. This was written by a colleague of ours who's moved on, Esther Warwick. But Esther wrote like a series of social stories, like somebody didn't get her ballot. I can't remember what all, there's like 3 or 4 social stories, but say someone didn't get her ballot. This is what she did. Somebody took her roommate's ballot to the drop box along with her to mail it in, and they confronted her and they kind of like talked through there. And by the way, I didn't go into this, but you are in our state, you can take somebody else's ballot and drop it off for them. They recommend you just take care of your own, so you know it's there, you know it gets in, but it is not a violation of our state law to say you have a spouse. It's not against the rules to take a family member's ballot and drop it off, you know, when you drop off your own, that's okay. But so anyways, this guide has some different social stories. It helps break down, especially for folks who haven't voted before. Especially we really kind of designed it for young adults with developmental disabilities so they could kind of think about through the process. But we found a lot of times with these easy read materials, a lot of people find them very accessible. And again, then there's all kinds of links and resources and who can vote and who can't vote and all that stuff. Any other thoughts? Or if we had well, we are planning a Canada forum, but I'm kind of curious if there are any specific issues that you think would be good to cover. Hey, Deanna, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was wondering if you have that guide that you just shared in any other languages?
Nope, not yet.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So are there any, especially thinking about the general election, is there anything in particular, any information that you would like to make sure people have access to? No? Okay. Well, we'll just make sure we were getting the initiatives in plain language out, and then we will organize our forum or forums and hopefully get some candidates. So you can ask questions directly of the candidates and you can hear from them what their thoughts are. And we would probably do that on Zoom. Since King County is such a large area, that way we can just grab more people. Okay. Well, if there are no questions, then thank you very much for coming, listening to an hour and some on voting. And thank you especially for listening to budget. It's like my thing. It's not everyone's thing, but it is so important to understand the budget.
Yeah.
If you care about human services.
And Ramona, I dropped that survey in the chat. It's titled "What's on the Ballot? Let's Discuss" survey.
Yes, if you're still on here, I'll also email it out to folks who came. Our funders, which is King County, they like to have a survey, so we know how we're doing. So if you could just click on the link and take the survey, that would be awesome. I'll also email it out to folks. All right. Well, have a great evening. Pam, thank you so much for facilitating on the Zoom, and Eric, thank you so much for helping me out
You're
here in
welcome.
person. Yeah, and if anyone has a question, I can hang on. Is that the? Yes, the Supreme Court goals program. All right, I am going to end the meeting. Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Pam.
Oh, you stop recording.
Oh.